The bullet that tore through the night didn't just threaten George Russell's life, it threatened the very foundation of wealth and ambition that the Russells built. Episode 7 ended in chaos, with George shot outside a Manhattan event, and fans are now bracing for Episode 8 to deliver answers no one is ready to hear. The most terrifying possibility: George Russell is dead. If this is true, the entire Russell empire could collapse into grief, scandal, and political chaos. Bertha would be forced to stand alone in a world that still resists her rise. She has clawed her way to power through charm, strategy, and ruthless persistence, but with George gone, her grip may finally begin to slip. A widow in mourning, a mother in fear, and a social queen with no king. The weight of that grief might ignite a new kind of Bertha, one who no longer plays by anyone's rules. But there's another possibility. George survived, barely. A critical injury could leave him vulnerable, unable to lead, and create a power vacuum that the vultures of business and society would rush to fill. This version of George's fate brings a different kind of suspense. Imagine Larry Russell suddenly thrust into his father's shoes. Would he rise to the occasion or crumble under pressure? And what would that do to his already broken relationship with Marian? Bertha might be forced to split herself in two, holding her family together while keeping the wolves of society at bay. A fragile George, trapped between life and death, might be the spark that forces the entire Russell family to evolve or implode. Then there's the most cunning outcome. The shot missed. Or maybe it hit, but not fatally, just enough to send a message. What if this wasn't a botched murder, but a warning? A signal that George has enemies far closer than he imagined. If that's the case, the real drama isn't just in his recovery. It's in his revenge. George Russell is not a man who forgives lightly. If someone tried to scare him into submission, they may have just made the biggest mistake of their lives. And as George begins to investigate, one thing becomes clear. He won't stop until he uncovers the truth. Not just about who pulled the trigger, but who gave the order. This theory sets up the finale as more than just emotional fallout. It becomes a chess match of power, secrets, and survival. In any of these outcomes, George's fate becomes the central axis of every other storyline. The ball, the family legacy, the shifting tides of New York society, they all orbit the question: what happens when the king is taken off the board? And perhaps more importantly, who's ready to take his place? Asterisk, this wasn't a random act of violence. The shooting of George Russell was too precise, too personal. His secretary was targeted, first neutralized quickly, and then the gunman turned directly to George. This wasn't a robbery, it was an execution attempt. Someone wanted George silenced, and that means one chilling thing: this was a hit. But by who and for what reason? The list of enemies is long, and each one of them had a reason to see George gone. Let's start with the most obvious suspect: Clay, the disgraced broker who once operated in George's inner circle. After being exposed and publicly humiliated, Clay warned George with venom in his voice, calling himself a cockroach, something that always survives. Was that metaphor a warning, a prophecy, or a promise of revenge? Clay knows George's patterns. He knows the locations he visits, the people closest to him, and the weaknesses in his empire. If anyone had both the motive and opportunity, it's Clay. But the method, the public setting, the boldness suggests something even bigger. This may not have been personal. This may have been strategic. Rival railroad magnates have always seen George as a threat. His recent aggressive acquisition of Merrick's shares and the copper mine breakthrough shifted the balance of power dramatically. By aligning himself with Edison's electric project on Pearl Street, George didn't just expand, he began to redefine industrial dominance in New York. That kind of vision makes enemies. Powerful, silent enemies. Taking George out would create chaos. His stock would plummet, investors would panic, and his entire business could fall into disarray. It would be the perfect opportunity for competitors to move in and take over the pieces. This wasn't just about personal vengeance. It could have been a corporate assassination dressed up as a random crime. Cold, calculated, and devastating. Then there's the darker, more political angle. George's involvement in modernizing the city has upset more than just rival businessmen. There are corrupt officials, old money, power players, and even law enforcement officers who benefit from keeping the system slow, inefficient, and under their control. George represents change, and change is dangerous when you're the one profiting from the past. A mysterious backroom alliance may have emerged, working together to eliminate the threat George poses. And let's not forget the social arena. There are whispers among the elite that Bertha's rise has ruffled more than a few feathers. Some may believe that eliminating George is the only way to slow her ascent. After all, Bertha has climbed too high, too fast, and many in old societies still see her as an outsider. Without George, Bertha loses her shield, and that could be exactly what her enemies wanted. But what if the enemy is even closer? A rival within the household, a disgruntled servant fed up with the constant pressure, or someone from the Russell past, long forgotten, now returned to collect a debt or settle a score. The final twist may not come from the boardroom or the ballroom, it might come from the shadows of their own home. Episode 8 could reveal that the person behind the gun isn't a stranger at all, but someone whose face Bertha knows. Someone George once trusted, and that betrayal could become the deepest wound of all. What's clear is that George's shooting wasn't just an isolated moment. It was a spark that ignited a war. And in this war, power isn't seized in daylight. It's stolen in the dark. Asterisk, while the gunfire aimed at George Russell shocked the city, its emotional aftershocks are already tearing through those closest to him, none more than Larry. For years, Larry has stood in his father's shadow, trying to find his own place in a world built by George's ambition and Bertha's social conquest. But now, with George wounded or possibly gone, the weight of that empire may fall squarely on his shoulders. And he's not ready. Where she's alone. Marian, the one person who saw him for more than his last name, has walked away. Their breakup, born from a cruel misunderstanding about the Haymarket Club, now feels even more tragic. She thought Larry was hiding who he really was, but in truth, he was just trying to prove himself. Now, Jack, the humble footman turned inventor, has cleared Larry's name, and Marian, she may be realizing just how deeply she's misjudged him. Episode 8 could be the moment everything changes, not just in society, but in their hearts. If George dies, Larry's grief will be overwhelming. The pressure to lead, to carry a name that built railroads and shook industries, may break him more, forge him into something new. And that emotional transformation will ripple into his relationship with Marian. Will she come forward, apologize, and fight for the man she once loved? Or will she remain silent, watching him from a distance as he drowns in responsibility? The cruel irony is that their love may still exist, burning quietly beneath all the pride and pain. But timing is everything. If Marian waits too long, Larry may harden. He may become the very man society expects, a cold, calculated successor who buries his feelings to preserve the empire. Or maybe, just maybe, Larry will make the first move, declaring his love in a grand, desperate gesture. Not just for Marian, but for the life he wants beyond business and bloodlines. A secret engagement. A vow to walk away from the legacy altogether. A choice to be free of the expectations that have haunted him. Asterisk, but what if it's already too late? Episode 8 could deliver a bittersweet ending, where Marian and Larry admit their love but still choose separate paths divided by class, reputation, or the scars left by mistrust. This would set the stage for a long, slow-burn arc in Season 4, one filled with longing glances across crowded rooms and the ache of what might have been. Meanwhile, Marian's own arc is on the edge of transformation. She's defied Agnes. She's questioned society's rules. She's ready to claim a life of her own making. Whether that life includes Larry may depend on one conversation, one letter, one look. And beneath it all, Bertha watches. She knows her son is spiraling. She knows Marian is the only one who can steady him. But will Bertha allow love to outweigh strategy? Or will she see Marian as a distraction from Larry's duty to the Russell name? Her influence could tip the balance. Because in this world, love is never just love. It's a political move, a social gamble, a risk to the empire. In Episode 8, love will be tested not just by feelings, but by grief, legacy, and the terrifying unknown of who survives and who doesn't. Larry and Marian are more than a couple on the brink. They are a reflection of everything. The Gilded Age stands for hope crushed by pride, tenderness strangled by ambition, and the fragile dream of building a future not shaped by the past. In the silence that followed George Russell's shooting, another kind of death quietly shattered someone else's world. Oscar Van Ryn, ever the charming, sharp-tongued socialite with secrets buried beneath a polished smile, has lost the one person he truly loved, John Adams. The heartbreak is unbearable, not just because of love lost, but because of how that love had to be hidden. John's death wasn't just a personal loss. It was a devastating blow to Oscar's carefully built armor. For years, he has survived in the shadows, pretending, performing, and conforming to a world that would never accept the truth of who he is. But now, with John gone and grief ripping through his soul like an open wound, Oscar is standing at the edge of a transformation he can no longer avoid. And in episode 8, everything could finally come crashing down. There is a growing weight pressing against Oscar's silence, and that pressure has a name. She sees more than Oscar realizes. She senses the grief that isn't just about losing a friend, and she's starting to understand the truth he's been so desperate to protect. Marian may become the one person who finally reaches through Oscar's emotional isolation, forcing him to confront not just his pain, but his identity. A confession to her would be a moment of profound vulnerability, but it could also be the beginning of Oscar's liberation. And yet, that confession may not come in a whisper, might erupt in a confrontation. A confrontation with the person he fears most. Agnes Van Rhijn. Agnes has always been the iron fist of tradition, the voice of old money, old rules, and old fear. Her love is sharp-edged, conditional, and smothered by the weight of reputation. She has built her life into control and appearances, but Oscar's grief is not something she can dismiss with a cutting remark or a disapproving glance. If Oscar finally tells Agnes the truth about who he is, it could destroy her or awaken her. Will she cling to pride and cast him out, further burying her family under a legacy of silence and shame? Or will she do the unthinkable and open her heart, even just an inch, to see the sun behind the mask? This moment could fracture their relationship forever, or begin to heal it. There is another possibility. Oscar might not say a word. Instead, he may spiral, turning to self-destruction, to isolation, to bitterness. He could swear off love entirely, letting John's memory harden into a wall between him and the world. Or, in a shocking twist, he could emerge bolder than ever, choosing to live openly, even if it means losing everything. Because what does he really have to lose now? The love of his life is dead. The mask is unbearable. And the world he was trying so hard to fit into just proved how cruel it can be. This arc isn't just about identity, it's about survival. It's about choosing truth over safety. And in the world of the Gilded Age, that's the most dangerous choice of all. Oscar's story is no longer a quiet subplot. It's a storm building in the distance. And in the finale, that storm may finally hit home. Whether he falls apart or rises from the ashes, one thing is certain. Oscar Van Rhijn will never be the same again. And neither will his family. While bullets threaten the body of the Russell Empire, it's Bertha Russell who must decide whether it lives or dies. In the wake of George's shooting, all eyes are on her not as a grieving wife, but as a symbol of power. And with the Newport Ball, the most prestigious event of the season, just days away, Bertha is at a crossroads. Will she cancel the ball? Out of respect for her husband's condition, risking the social capital she's fought so ruthlessly to gain, or will she go through with it anyway, turning grief into performance, sorrow into strength, and the ballroom into a throne room? She refuses to surrender. Bertha doesn't just survive pressure, she bends it to her will. And that's exactly what makes her next move so terrifying. Because whatever she chooses, it will shake the entire foundation of New York society. Imagine the sign guests whispering behind fans, unsure if the ball will even begin. The orchestra playing on as if nothing has happened. And then Bertha arrives not broken, but blazing with resolve, ready to show the world that even death cannot topple a Russell. She could turn the ball into a tribute to George, or into a political statement, doubling down on her place at the top. Or worse, she might use the ball to distract, to reset the narrative, or to unleash something even bigger. A surprise announcement, a public declaration, an engagement, a promotion. Bertha is never one to waste an opportunity, and in the face of devastation, she might strike harder than ever before. But Bertha's plans don't just hang on her own shoulders. Gladys, her daughter, has been making quiet waves across the ocean. In England, away from her mother's suffocating expectations. She's found her own power and, possibly, her own love. Her growing bond with the Duke of Buckingham could alter everything. Episode 8 might deliver a shocking twist. Gladys return in the midst of crisis, unrecognizable to the woman Bertha tried to mold. She may announce her engagement without her mother's approval, or worse, refuse to return home at all. The Russells are already splintering. George's fate has created a vacuum, and Bertha is scrambling to keep her family intact. But if Gladys defies her, Bertha may find herself fighting on two fronts against society outside and rebellion within. And still, the danger isn't over. The shooting wasn't an accident, and the shadows are still moving. Rumors swirl around Miss Andre, the former maid who was dismissed for leaking secrets. Her silence has been far too quiet. She may return with more information, possibly about Clay, or even a deeper conspiracy that implicates someone close to Bertha. There's a chance she knows who ordered the hit. And if she does, she won't give that information away without a price. Miss Andre could become a lingering threat, a specter haunting Bertha's every move in season 4, waiting to strike when the Russell name is most vulnerable. And then there's the future. If episode 8 ends in tragedy, George dead, Oscar outed, Marian estranged, Gladys distant, it's almost certain that a new rival will rise in season 4. Perhaps someone introduced quietly at the ball, a young industrialist, a cunning socialite, a family we haven't met yet, waiting in the wings. The power vacuum left by George's fall will not go unchallenged. And Bertha, she'll be forced to evolve again, not just a wife or hostess, but a queen with no king, defending a kingdom built on scandal, ambition, and survival. The Gilded Age isn't just about wealth and fashion. It's about war, social war, emotional war, and now, possibly, actual war between families and factions who will stop at nothing to take what they believe is theirs. Episode 8 won't just close a chapter. It will burn the book, setting fire to everything we thought was secure. Because the future of the Russell family and the very rules of high society are about to be rewritten. And this time, no one is safe.